Wolf McQuade and Code of Silence. Code of Silence is directed by Andrew Davis, so that actually made me pay attention because he directed The Fugitive, Under Siege, some other action movies. Unfortunately, it's not that great of an action film. It tries to be a little bit of a crime drama with an action film, but unfortunately gets progressively silly towards the end. But he's a Chicago cop who, in the beginning, there's a drug bust that he's in charge of that goes wrong. What happens is the Italian mob tries to rob the Colombian mob as the drug deal's going on. So they kind of interrupt this drug bust, and they end up killing a bunch of the Colombians and one of the undercover cops that was part of the bust. There's an old cop partnered with a young cop who, as they're going down a hallway, a kid walks out of one of the apartments and the old cop shoots him. But then what he does is he pulls a gun from his pant leg and plants it on the kid to make it look like he drew a gun on him to make it look like it was a clean shooting. But the young partner witnesses this. Now that whole scenario sets up the whole idea of the movie. Chuck Norris didn't witness this, but he's pretty sure it wasn't a clean kill. So he refuses to back the guy up. He doesn't accuse him of anything, but he doesn't really back him up. So that's the Code of Silence part. Because in the midst of that, all his fellow cops start to turn on him. Now he does have a partner played by Dennis Farina, who backs him up, but he's kind of out of commission because in the opening scenes he gets shot in the leg. So Dennis Farina is basically just there to pop up every now and then and suggest that they start some new line of work that's, these ridiculous jobs that is supposed to be kind of comedy relief. So he's kind of wasted in the movie because I like Dennis Farina. Since some of the Colombians got killed, they're trying to kidnap the daughter of one of the mob guys who was in the gang or mob that tried to rob them and killed a lot of their Colombians. They're trying to kidnap one of their daughters because I guess he's gone into hiding, so they're trying to use the daughter to pull him out from hiding so they can get revenge. So Chuck Norris is trying to protect her throughout this whole thing. But I did not enjoy Code of Silence as much as I enjoyed Lone Wolf McQuade. The action just wasn't that great, wasn't that interesting. For example, there's a fight on top of a train going through Chicago. Sounds like a good idea, but the way it's shot, you can see the train is moving pretty slow. They've got Chuck Norris actually on the train, so it's not a stunt double or something, so they probably wanted to feature that this is really Chuck Norris. Also, there's like a foot chase in the middle of the movie that they're chasing the daughter that they're trying to kidnap, the bad guys are, and it's just not an interesting foot chase. The worst part of the movie is they introduce early on a robotic tank, police tank, that I guess the Chicago police is buying. They do a demonstration of it. Computerized robotic tank that you control with a remote. That when it gets to the end where Chuck Norris has to confront the bad guys who have the girl, and he has no backup because all the cops have turned on him, he gets the tank and is using the tank. The problem with that is, one, it's just a little goofy that this robotic tank knows what to do and where to shoot because he's not controlling it with the remote the whole time. So there's some lapses in logic, just doesn't make sense. But also, if you see a Chuck Norris movie, you want to see Chuck Norris beating up the bad guys. You don't want him to have this robot doing the work for him. Now, he does, some stuff on his own as well, but it really diminishes the power of Chuck. So now let's talk about Lone Wolf McQuade. Okay, so that brings us to Lone Wolf McQuade. Now, this was the reason I bought this DVD. I remember seeing this movie as a kid and really liking it. So it is Chuck Norris, and David Carradine is the bad guy. So that's pretty manly. You got Chuck Norris versus David Carradine, Kill Bill. You got Bill versus Chuck. Chuck and Bill, Bill and Chuck. Come on. So basically the story is Chuck Norris is a Texas Ranger. Finds out David Carradine is a gun smuggler. David Carradine has stolen a bunch of weapons from the army. There's a hijacking. Of course, Chuck Norris's daughter, Lone Wolf McQuade's daughter, witnesses the hijack. The bad guys, she's with her boyfriend. They kill her boyfriend, and then they push her car off of a cliff. But she survives. But of course, that only stirs the Chuck nest. The bee's nest that is Chuck Norris. That is Lone Wolf McQuade. Okay, it's shot like a spaghetti western, especially the beginning. If you ever have seen any Sergio Leone movies, there's a heavy influence of Leone films with this. Like I said, especially in the beginning. The music, very spaghetti western, very Morricone, or however you say his name. Guy that scored Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West, which are some of my favorite westerns. There's also some small details in this movie that I probably would not have picked up on as a kid that I really liked as an adult. And they're specific enough that they had to be intentional. At one part of the movie, he's on the phone with somebody just getting some information, one of those just kind of mundane moments where the writers, I'm sure, were just trying to get across some information that he's doing some investigating of David Carradine. But while he's on the phone talking, he's doodling, and it just cuts, and he's drawing boobs on some old picture. And it just seems like one of those things like they were trying to figure out, well, what should you be doing while you're on the phone, Chuck? And somebody said, draw some boobs on that picture. We'll just get a shot of it. It was kind of funny. Another cool thing, and this was may have been a choice of David Carradine, I'm not sure, but you know how in movies, when anybody gets out of a helicopter, and I would do this too, they duck down because you got these blades. Even if you know the blades are high enough, they're not going to chop your head off. You always kind of bend down, and run from underneath the helicopter. Not David Carradine. Standing up straight as a stick, walking slow and casual. I just, when I saw it, I was like, that's one cool dude. Okay, so let's talk about the bad things with Lone Wolf McQuade. First of all, the acting. The dilemma is, do you surround Chuck Norris with good actors or bad actors? If you surround him with good actors, he's just going to seem even worse than he really is. If you surround him with bad actors, he might not seem as bad as he really is. And, of course, they chose the latter here. He's surrounded with some really bad actors, with the exception, of course, of David Carradine, who is really good in this, just plays it cool as can be. Also, the actor who plays the old mentor, he's pretty good. He's an actor I've seen in some other westerns. I don't know his name, but he's usually pretty good. Everyone else, pretty bad. Chuck Norris is partnered up with I'm not sure what he is, state police, I think. That actor is not very good. He's got a wife who's just terrible. Ex-wife who's terrible. Daughter's not good. The love interest is okay. So yeah, he's pretty much surrounded by bad actors. Another thing that's bad about this movie, the dialogue is terrible. In the beginning, somebody actually says to a bad guy, "You'll never get away with this." Anytime there's a scene with Chuck Norris and the love interest, or Chuck Norris and his family, his daughter, his ex-wife, those scenes are usually cringe-worthy. The good that outweighs the bad here is that there's enough action throughout this movie to keep your interest. They did a really good job of keeping fight scenes or conflicts happening throughout the movie. So there's always something, right around the corner. So just hang in there. Now, there was one piece of dialogue that I really enjoyed that I actually had to write down. There's a scene where Chuck Norris Lone Wolf McQuade first sees the love interest. It's at a horse stable, and he sees her across the horse stables, and soft romantic music is playing as he gazes at her lovingly. And the old mentor steps into frame and says, "How'd you like to bite that in the butt, develop lockjaw, and be dragged to death?" Classy. Some things I liked about this movie. Again, the Western motif that they use here, I thought was pretty well done. In a Western, you have the hero and his horse. In this movie, you've got Chuck and his truck. His truck in this movie is pretty much his horse. They set up early on that his Dodge is supercharged. Somebody is following him, and he flips a switch, and the truck takes off. So that's just kind of a scene in the beginning that's foreshadowing of something that's going to be done later in the movie, which is later in the movie, David Carradine, the bad guy, has caught Lone Wolf McQuade. He's been beaten to a pulp and tells his men to bury Lone Wolf McQuade in his truck. They're out in the desert, and they've got these trenches dug where I think they've been hiding weapons. Remember, David Carradine is an arms dealer. So they throw Lone Wolf McQuade into his truck, throw him in one of these pits, covers it up with dirt, and he's supposed to die there, of course. Of course, it's Chuck Norris. You can't just bury Chuck Norris. First thing he does when he wakes up and is buried in his truck is he grabs a beer. You're like, oh, okay, I guess he's going to drink a beer. He opens the beer, splashes it all over his face, hits the switch. Now, you've seen earlier what the truck can do. So suddenly, the ground starts to shake. The bad guys are looking around, and this truck just emerges from the dirt, and it's a cool scene. I remember that's actually the scene I remembered from when I'd seen it as a kid, and I was wondering if it would kind of hold up, and I thought it did. I enjoyed it again as an adult, so that was a fun scene. Another thing I should mention, in a lot of these tough guy movies, manly movies, the bad guys always do something to threaten the hero's loved one, relative, or threaten their old mentor, or threaten their romantic interest, the love interest, or threaten even their pet. So one of those is usually in any kind of tough guy movie, any kind of manly movie. Lone Wolf McQuade, all of those things happen. His daughter gets threatened. His loved one, his romantic interest gets threatened. His old mentor gets threatened. And his pet wolf, I think it's a wolf, would make sense, Lone Wolf McQuade. It's either a wolf or like a wolf-dog mix, also gets threatened. I won't say how, I don't want to be too spoilerish, but all those things happen in this movie. So they hit all those kind of cliches. When they hit them all like that, it doesn't even feel like a cliche anymore. It feels like it was almost done on purpose. So just to raise the stakes for Lone Wolf McQuade, so that was cool. So the last thing to mention, if you have not made up your mind on whether or not you should watch Lone Wolf McQuade, I'm going to tell you something that will make you want to watch it. Evil Dwarf in an Electric Wheelchair. Evil Dwarf in an Electric Wheelchair. Yeah, you're going to watch it now, aren't you? Yeah. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Magic Hour Movie Man, and those were some manly movies. Code of Silence and Lone Wolf McQuade. You just got choked up.